It's time for the Bulldogs team reveal for Game Week 11, but first, looking back on Game Week 10, I scored a total of 73 points, which wasn't a great score, but enough to keep me at a rank of 1.2 million. But now onto this week's team, and first up in goal it's David Raya. Not much needs to be said about Raya, other than the fact he's been extremely consistent with his points return. I saw a post earlier this week saying that the Arsenal keeper had kept 7 clean sheets this season, but had only made 2 saves. This might give some people the impression that having him in our team takes up a valuable spot from the Gunners that could potentially be better utilised by another outfield player. However, an asset priced at 5.8 million that is guaranteed to start and continuously brings in 6 points is a good asset to have in your team, in my opinion. One player where there's seemingly no debate over whether he's worth including in our starting 11 is Gabriel, who's returned an average of 11 points across the last 5 game weeks. The Arsenal centre-back is now priced at 6.6 million, which is still honestly an extremely fair price considering his point ceiling. I'd personally easily pay upwards of 7 million for him. The quality of the Gunners' set pieces makes Gabriel such an appealing asset for attacking as well as defensive returns, and I just think he's an absolutely essential player to include in your squad. After scoring an 11-pointer in Game Week 7, Dan Burn has been an extremely underwhelming own in FPL, and if it wasn't for my other underperforming defenders, would definitely be the player on the chopping block this week. After starting the season well from a defensive point of view, Newcastle have failed to keep a clean sheet in their last 3 league matches, and with games against the likes of City and Spurs on the horizon, I'm not entirely confident that they'll pick up many across the next month or so. I'm reluctantly going to start the Magpies defender this week, but I don't think he'll be in my team for much longer. I've got 1 free transfer this week and I've already used it early by removing James Tarkowski and replacing him with Daniel Munoz. If I left this one any longer, I'd almost certainly be priced out of the move, so I decided to pull the trigger early. With 5 strong upcoming fixtures for Palace, I think that including a part of their defence is a sensible idea. Deciding on which one to go for though is probably the tougher question. I'm personally drawn the most to Mark Guehi and Munoz, but I think I just slightly prefer the latter, due to the fact that if Palace do concede, he always has the remainder of the game to acquire an attacking return, which I think Guehi is slightly less likely to come by. I'm definitely torn on whether to start or bench Reinders this week at home to Liverpool, but part of me thinks that this is the type of game that he could potentially do really well in. If Man City decide to start Rodri as a defensive midfielder and offer Reinders the license to venture further up the pitch, then he's the kind of player who will be able to make key runs and exploit the space that Liverpool leave behind with some clever through balls. In the short cameo he featured in Game Week 10, we saw Reinders very nearly find the back of the net in the final minutes against Bournemouth, and if he continues to find himself in those kinds of positions, then I have every faith that he'll start to score more heavily in FPL. Bukayo Saka is next up in the 5-man midfield. After having a couple of impressive performances where it seemed like all the attacking build-up play was going through him, Saka's had a couple of quiet weeks. Despite that, I still think he's a decent long-term hold. At the moment, I would say that he's not quite justifying his 10.1 million price tag. However, because there are so few premiums in the game currently who are scoring big, I don't mind having a large portion of my budget wrapped up in him. Sunderland away will definitely be a tough test, but you'd expect the Gunners to still be big favourites coming into this one. After an unbelievably strong start to the season, the returns have started to dry up for Antoine Semenyo, who's only been able to pick up 1 assist over his last 3 matches, and across those matches he's amassed a total of just 9 FPL points. His attacking data has also dropped dropped off considerably. However, it's worth noting that he has faced Palace and City away during that time, and from this point all the way up until around the midpoint of the season, his fixtures do look a lot more favourable from an attacking stance. I still think the Ghanaian's a decent long-term hold. He's a 90-minute man on penalties, who also plays for an attacking side eyeing up European football. Iliman Ndiaye limped off the pitch just after the 60-minute mark against Sunderland, which is a shame for us owners, as there was definitely potential for more returns in that game. However, on the plus side, he did pick up a 9-pointer after scoring an impressive goal in the first half, and it does sound as though he'll be available for game week 11 versus Fulham. I'm still very much on the fence about him. I've heard a load of people online saying that he's a great pick, but every time I watch him I find he always finds himself quite isolated on the right hand side and doesn't seem to get nearly as involved in goalmouth action as he did last season. For now, I'm happy holding on to him, especially given this week's fixture. Bryan Mbeumo completes the 5-man midfield for his away fixture versus Spurs. Despite blanking last week, I'm still very happy holding Mbeumo in my team, as I think there are plenty of goals up for grabs from now up until he heads off to AFCON. The midfielder has picked up 4 attacking returns across his last 5 league matches, and United as a whole have scored 10 times across those games, so I think it's ideal to have at least one of Mbeumo, Cunha or Fernandes in your team moving forwards. If I was only allowed to have one in my team at this current time, I would marginally favour Mbeumo. Right, so let's talk about this. Erling Haaland triple captain. Firstly, I definitely want to use the chip on the big Norwegian, and it's just a question of what the best week is to use it in. For me, it has to be a week where City play at home, and with that, I recognise that there are opportunities against the likes of Leeds, Sunderland and West Ham. However, I've said time and time again that I think Haaland performs better against teams that play higher defensive lines. We saw this happen last week against Bournemouth, but also against United and Brighton. He's also on red-hot form at the moment, and the thing with him playing Liverpool is you know that he's almost guaranteed to play the full 90. However, if this does go wrong, then feel free to come back and leave me a hate comment. Completing the 11 is of course Mateta for this very appetising home fixture against Brighton. Honestly, I can foresee a situation where my vice-captain potentially outscores my triple captain this week, as Palace looks so strong at home and Brighton always concede a ton of chances. I was one of those FPL managers who made the switch last week from João Pedro to Mateta, and I've heard a number of people considering switching back, but for me, Mateta is the much better pick moving forwards. He's just so integral to his team's attack, and whenever Palace do score, there only ever seems to be a handful of players you'd expect to be involved, the Frenchman being at the top of that list. And that means that making the bench this week, it's Dubravka, Senesi, Romero and Krupi Jr. But that's the team for this week. What do you make of it? Let me know down below. And also, leave your own team dilemmas in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer them. Cheers as always for watching, and best of luck in hitting those big green arrows.